right, welcome back. You're still watching TVC Breakfast, and we're looking at other issues this morning on the show, looking at the calls for a cabinet reshuffle. Is it inevitable or what? We'll find out. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari has urged all members of his cabinet to work harder to earn the trust of Nigerians. Yeah, he gave the charge at the Federal Executive Council meeting to mark the first full year of the ministers coming to office. The State House correspondent Maria Lashe spoke to some ministers on the journey so far in the last 12 months.
On November the 11th, 2015, 6 months into his administration, President Muhammadu Buhari swore in 36 new ministers to run the nation's ministries. He charged them then to immediately proceed to work.
I have also been conscious of the need not to repeat such mistakes of the past, where the right people were allocated the wrong portfolios, which translated into their kwafomu to our collective detriment, despite their obvious capabilities.
Some of the ministers who spoke to TVC News admitted that despite the fact that the challenges are still enormous, they are doggedly forging ahead. Ibe Kachuku, Minister of State for Petroleum, was in the eye of the storm during a period of prolonged severe fuel scarcity. He and other ministers believe there will be lights at the end of the tunnel.
There are still challenges ahead, challenges of foreign exchange, challenges of trying to get the refinery. If refineries do not work, we have not started. And whatever we're doing, we've set a timeline of 2018 drop in production by 60%, 2019 existing production completely. That is absolutely critical.
We are doing a lot in terms of planning to turn things around, but the results will take some time to come. In the meantime, we urge people to please be patient with us. We know that things are not easy, but the things we're doing are important and they need to be allowed time to take for fruits to be reaped.
Nobody here would deny the fact that the cost of living has gone up. Nobody would deny the fact that the transporters have increased in money for transportation. Nobody would deny the fact that food prices have also gone up. And so these are the things we take into account by that committee and make the appropriate recommendation in view of where also the country has found itself economically.
Nigerians also react to the ministers' performances in the last 1 year. They expect the ministers to stop the blame game and get to work. They call on President Buhari to reshuffle his cabinet should they fail. Maria Olasheinde, TVC News, Abuja.
All right, we're now being joined by a lawyer, Jimmy Abia. It's good to have you this morning.
My pleasure being here.
And a compliment of the season.
I wish you the same.
Okay. Now, in this report we played, we heard the president urging ministers to say, work hard to earn the confidence of Nigerians. Do you think that charge is being carried out by the ministers?
Well, you put that into perspective that these ministers have been in office for quite a while, about a year now, you know, since their appointment. And then if that charge is just coming, recently, within a few months, away from now, you would be wondering, what did they come to do? That charge was meant to have come, from the time they were, appointed into office. You expect that, they kick off and try to make sure that the country is put on a good pedestal. But that being that as it may, don't forget that these persons who are in these offices, might also be facing certain challenges which they may not be telling the public because they are appointed by the appointing authority, and there might be some problems. Of course, that's not to make excuses for them, but of course to put everything in perspective. For instance, let me give you an instance, the issue of release of funds. You have areas where certain ministers might not have had the relevant funds being released from the relevant quarters. And if this is not done, so some of these ministers may not be able to carry out their objectives, certain things they want to do. and they may not come out to the public and say these things. Of course, if it were the senators, being a different arm of the government, the legislature, they could come out and say this is our problem and damn the consequences. But being appointees, these ministers may not be able to say this outrightly, to the public. But being that as it may, we also would have expected better from these ministers. When you look at certain areas, you look at policy policy objectives, we expect a situation where some of these ministers would have come out and say, this is what we want to achieve. At least Nigerians would have known that, okay, this is what we are expecting from this ministry. Then it's a different thing again if these things are not being achieved. But you don't find them having, the other time somebody was telling us about producing pencils, in Nigeria. We're talking about 21st century Nigeria, and you have a minister talking about production of pencils. So you see that the direction, they've not even charted a direction. Yes, we understand that they may be facing certain challenges that they're not telling us about, but if there is another thing that could make someone perform, if the person already has an objective. Okay, this is what I want to achieve.
So would you say then that may just be at the root of the problem or seeming lack of performance on the part of this cabinet so far in the last 1 year? You've not seen a clear-cut definition of goals and objectives that they have individually been able to set for themselves. But 1 year, is it really enough to score this people? Don't you think they would have needed some time to understand what their portfolios are in the first place, the runnings, what exactly is expected from their office and all of that?
Yeah, while 1 year is not enough, to fully give a pass mark or otherwise, to these officers and even to the government. But of course, there's something called continuous assessment, which you have even in schools. So you expect that you would have had a direction in 1 year. If you have a direction within that 1 year, it would actually affect other things. There will be a seeming, okay, this is where we're going to. In the last discussion, here on this panel, you had someone saying that there is no direction. There is no direction yet, and this is what we expect to see at least in 1 year. We're not saying it must all be huru within 1 year, but we expected to have seen a direction within the first year, and then so we know that, okay, by the second year this is what we expect, by the third year this is what we expect, and going forward these are the things we expect. But it doesn't seem that is happening.
But if we have to put all the ministers on the same pedestal, which of them do you think is seemingly impressing Nigerians?
You want me to
name names?
Let's go into it.
You put
if there are
on the spot.
On the spot. I think the Minister of Petroleum, has actually, and this is to be frank, has actually, done a lot. When you look at where we were, in terms of the fuel crisis, you remember the queues we had at the filling stations and all that. And then you also see how he has been able to also manage the labor issues, within the petroleum sector. And then the crisis that almost erupted, with the movement of the university, the maritime university. Yes, that is not strictly within his own ministry, because you're talking about maritime now. Yeah. But he was the one who went in, and tried to resolve this. When some other minister, the actions and statements of some other minister, almost heated up the entire area. So I would think that he has done, to an extent, creditably well. But of course, there is more, to be done, even in that sector. Of course, not him alone, but even the other arms of government, like when you are talking about the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill and all that. there's a lot more to be done in that sector. But I think he has done a bit well. Then you're also looking at the area of works. You have the Minister of Works, Housing and Power. I think in the area of works, a bit of work. We've seen a bit of work, in some areas, but not as much, as you would have given a pass mark, as much as you would have given. But we've seen we are looking at it from the perspective of other ministers now, not
in comparison.
In comparison, with other ministers, you would say that in terms of works, but in terms of power, in terms of housing, we have not seen as much as we would have been expecting, in those areas.
Okay. All right, we'll of course look at all of those. We'll find out in the course of our discussion. Of course, we've heard that as many as 10 ministries or ministers may be redeployed or dropped, and all of that. We'll find out how inevitable this move would be for the president. We'll take a short break and return shortly. Stay with us.
If you're just joining us, you're watching TVC Breakfast, and we are discussing the call for cabinet reshuffle. Nigerians have been reacting to the performance of many of the ministers or the cabinet members in the cabinet of President Muhammadu Buhari. Well, they have their opinions. They are the real people, so whatever they say, it really counts. We have in the studio a lawyer, Jimmy Abia, and we've been talking about this. Now, from what you were laying down earlier on, it is obvious that Nigerians are not very, very, they're not going to pop champagne for any of the ministers so far. But is that a call? Is the call for cabinet reshuffle very, very justifiable right now?
Very, very, very justifiable. You look at it that the initial appointment, let's leave some room for the president, because when you look at it, the first appointments were based on, political patronage. Okay, this person, did a lot, during my election, so let's bring them on board. But I think going forward, now is the time for real work, because the time is short. So I expect the president to actually rejig the cabinet by reshuffling, moving certain people, removing certain people, moving certain people from one ministry to the other. I expect that this would actually bring, if it is handled well, because it's not just to reshuffle a cabinet, but also handling it well, bringing square pegs in square holes, round pegs in round holes. When you do that, you will find that in the next few months you will see things picking up. But if you do not handle it well, if you just reshuffle just for the sake of political patronage, and you bring on board same political class again, you're going to have the same thing. You're going to be running in circles.
All right, since you're talking about some of the changes you would like to see, there's some ministers who are overloaded, in the words of some people. Some have 3 powerful ministries. They're
no longer ministries.
And three
powerful assignments.
Yeah, 3 powerful assignments. Some have 2 heavy assignments and all of that. Do you expect to see some kind of unbundling, if I could use that word?
Yes.
So that those people can actually perform.
Exactly. Indeed. If I were given such responsibility, such huge responsibility, I would decline. The reason being that people would be marking you based on what the responsibilities you're given, even if these responsibilities are too enormous for you to handle. Now, what we have had in those ministries, where they were brought together and fused, is that you still have the same personnel costs. You still have the same cost, running costs for those ministries, because the fact that they were brought together doesn't mean that you've reduced costs. You have not reduced any cost. You are still running that cost, but you have reduced leadership. Because now the responsibility of 3 persons or more in terms of leadership, you have put it on 1 person. So the leadership, which is the critical factor, is what you have ended up reducing. while not reducing the cost of running government. So I do not see much sense in it. What I expect is that some of these ministries would would be broken up, so that you have persons manning specific responsibility on which they can be assessed upon. Not a situation where you model up. Look, power is already a very big ministry, is already a very big sector, and being that we have a lot of issues in that area, then also we have a lot of infrastructural deficit. We have a serious deficit in terms of infrastructure. So works is also a very huge one. Then housing is also a very huge one. I would expect that going forward, these ministries, are kept separate. The way is kept separate, and then persons who are capable are brought in. Of course, the person who is manning the three now could be restricted to one, so that we can assess him on that, and we can also see performance.
Let me take you up on that. BRF, for example, Babatunde Raji Fashola, who's the Minister for Power, Works and Housing, he did something that seems to be quite ingenious, taking special advisors, his former Commissioner for Housing, Toyin Hamzat, and of course Faudo Oki, special advisors to help him man this other departments under him. Would that make any difference? Do you think that has made any difference for that ministry specifically?
The buck, to an extent, stops at the minister's table before getting to the president. So there are certain responsibilities, even by law, that the minister only can carry out. So those responsibilities will still have to get to the minister. And don't forget that this man still has only 24 hours, just like any of us. And you can imagine what it involves, having all these ministries, because at the end of the day, they would have to come back to the same man. So even if you have capable hands, manning this as special advisors, the buck will still stop at the table of the minister. And that's a huge responsibility. I expect to see cabinet ministers handling this responsibility, so that those roles that they are meant to play as ministers would be played by them without having too much of muddled up responsibilities.
All right, now we've had analysts who have said that you don't even blame the ministers in the first place. It is the president himself, because the point there is the president gives you the direction of what his agenda and aim and objective should be, and then the ministers fall in line. In that regard, how would you assess the direction from the president himself that should put the ministers in line?
Of course, I try to lay emphasis on this. From my first statement, you'd expect that the direction, because the leadership, should come from the president. So I think that there is a lot more, that needs to be done by the president, going forward. Because you look at, for instance, the finance ministry. You're looking at the economy. You're looking at the economy. The management of the economy would actually come from an economic team. Now, what sort of economic team have you brought on board? These are things that the minister alone cannot do. This is something that the president has to come out and say, look at the persons I want to work with in terms of rejigging this economy, bringing this economy back to life. Let me call a team and say, give them responsibility and say, this is what I want them to do. So to an extent, to a huge extent, the president has a lot of responsibility in that regard. But again, don't forget that a leader is also as good as his lieutenants. You understand? So the persons here appointed should also, to their own, because they have also been given responsibilities to within their own powers, within what is available, to them. We ought to be seeing something. For instance, what I would have expected from the finance ministry was some sort of direction, some sort of leadership in terms of the economy. You see a situation where the CBN seems, yes, the CBN is meant to be independent, no doubt about that. But it seems that there is no policy direction, for even the CBN to operate under. So the CBN, goes forth and back simply because there is no direction, from the finance ministry, coming from the finance ministry. And of course, this also, you also talk about the issue of, an economic team that understands.
And that economic team that you talk about is what a lot of analysts say is actually missing in this government, and that's why there's this trial and failure kind of policy direction that this government has been having. Now there are talks that the ministries to be dropped will be dropped along geopolitical zones, and those to be picked will be done exactly the same way along geopolitical zones. Is this really what Nigeria needs, or people who really have the wherewithal, the expertise, and the know-how to actually hit the ground running, which was what Nigerians expected this cabinet that's in place right now to do in the first place?
Yes. Of course, the Constitution has made it clear that you must have ministers from all the states of the Federation. That's why you have about 36 or 37 ministers. Of course, Amina Mohammed for Environment has just left for a new assignment. Congratulations to her. Of course, you know that Kogi State doesn't have a minister.
Labor.
Minister of State for Labor and Employment. Has passed on, and then he's yet to be replaced. But I don't think that going forward it's simply a matter of dropping certain people by geopolitical zone. I expect the president to do an assessment of the performance of ministers, not a situation where you have, okay, I've dropped 2 from Southwest, so I'm going to drop 2 from Northwest, I'm going to drop 2 from Northeast, I'm going to drop 2 from Southeast. No, what I expect is a situation whereby you assess their performance. Certain people would have to be moved from one ministry to the other, and certain people would have to be dropped, not based on where they come from. Of course, you already have ministers from the entire states of the Federation, but based on what they are going to offer to the government and to the people of Nigeria.
All right, because when it comes to the issue of dropping and picking from the geopolitical zones, we know that there is competence everywhere. Everywhere in the country you find competence. But when you talk about dropping people from, we're going to balance the dropping so that everybody is affected one way or the other, Nigerians will certainly be thinking that instead of picking people to bolster or to enhance the economy and the strength, it is just politics. But let us even talk about the issue of communication. Is the government communicating with Nigerians, connecting with Nigerians the way it should be?
Of course not. Of course not. You have a situation where there's a lot of speculation out there as to what government is doing. So the communication it has not been as it should. Government should have been able to come out and make its policy directives known to the people. But of course, the question you will be asking is whether these policy directives are even there. Because when you want to communicate, you communicate what is existing. You don't communicate what does not exist. So the question you will be asking is whether the first things that are meant to be done before the communication, have already been done. So yes, you say that there isn't enough communication. Nigerians aren't, their feedback isn't getting to the government, because one is the government communicating to you, telling you what they want to do, because that's what communication is all about. If not, it will be a monologue.
Exactly.
So there's a sense in which you're asking the question whether the feedback of Nigerians, look, that Nigerians are suffering and things are difficult, whether it is actually getting back to government. So those are the two angles of communication. So you have it that this thing is not being done effectively.
See, Nigeria is now in a recession. I mean, that's open knowledge. Yes, of course, we'll have to wrap right here. But the position of Minister of State at a time like this, how important, how relevant, is this position really?
Yes, that position was actually brought up, simply because we had the issue of the Constitution prescribing that all states, would have ministers.
Representation.
Yes, representation in the cabinet. So that position was actually developed, to take care of all of that. But I don't think that's a big issue. There was a time the ministers of state and their ministers were having issues, but there came also a time when there seemed to have been division of responsibilities, between the ministers and the ministers of state. So you see a semblance that you see a situation where in the Ministry of Education, you see a situation where in the Ministry of Education, the Minister of State for Education is handling secondary and primary education, while the Minister of Education is handling other things. Okay. So there is already a division of labor in that regard. So right. It's not a huge problem for us. The important thing is to have capable persons who are able to deliver, on their responsibilities.
All right. Jimmy Abia, thank you very much for coming on the program.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
So much.
All right, this is where we come to the end of this week's edition of TVC Breakfast. It's just 2 days before Christmas. Ngozi's already flying the red color, which
yes, but that just only happened. I wasn't even thinking about Christmas when I put this on.
I know. All right. Have a great day ahead and Merry Christmas to everyone.
Yes.
I am Mike Okwache. You can follow me for updates across Nigeria, Africa, and the world using my Twitter handle at @MOkwacheTVC.
And just to remind you, don't put yourself under pressure. Just do it within your capabilities. Christmas, you will still enjoy it anyhow. I am Ngozi Alibu, wishing you the very best of the season at Ngozi Alibu. That is my Twitter handle. You can follow me there. On that note, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. Stay blessed.
And I won't forget your pounded yam on Christmas.
Yes, and afang.